Welcome back to all the students. In today's video lecture, we are going to explain another theory which tries to explain the evolution, Lamarckism. Yes, it's named after the scientist who proposed this theory, Jean Baptiste Lamarck. We are going to discuss about him later on. So the first one, Jean Baptiste Lamarck. He was a French biologist, French naturalist, and he was actually the person behind this theory of Lamarckism. What did he said? What did he do? Evolutionary pioneer, among the first person in the scientific community to argue that species can change over time by natural laws. Yes, he was the first person, amongst the first person, if not the first person, in the scientific community who argued that species, organisms may change over a long duration of times through natural laws, right? Before that, it was not known which law, how does they change, how the characteristics are changed over time. It was not known. But Jean Baptiste Lamarck was amongst the first persons to argue that natural things may lead to changes in characteristics of organisms. The key theory proposed that acquired traits could be passed to offspring. This is a very interesting thing actually, that Jean Baptiste Lamarck said that the characters which we acquire throughout our lifetime can get transmitted to the next generation, to the offsprings. We are going to talk about it in detail later on. And he is also renowned for classifying invertebrates systematically. He also classified invertebrates systematically, right? So what is the core idea? What is the basis? What is the central idea of Lamarckism, and what exactly Lamarck preaches? He actually tells us that the difference between use and disuse of organs. What he says, and let's understand this in a simple language. He simply says that the organs which you use the most will get developed, and at the same time the organs which you do not use frequently will get degenerated over time. This is the first part of this theory, in which he says use it or lose it. In simple words, as you can see here, use it, either you use it or lose it, right? Here, either you use it or lose it. Frequently used organs grow stronger because you are using it much. Those organs are actually very useful. That's why you are using it frequently. And as you use something frequently, it becomes stronger and more developed over time. But the organs which you do not use over time, which you do not use frequently, unused organs weakens gradually. They slowly weakens, and across generation they might get disappeared. There are many examples, like vestigial, in case of vestigial organs, there are many organs which becomes develop over time, and there are many organs like our wisdom teeth and tailbone, and many other examples can be given to support this theory, that if you do not use any organ, that organ will become like it will become weak, very weak, and in some generations possibly it may even disappear from your body. But the organs which you use the most, which are used frequently, those organs will be developed. Okay. But the second part of this theory is very interesting actually, but it does not have enough proof. It does not have any enough evidences in order to prove that it happens actually. So what is the second part of this theory? The second part of this theory, apart from use or disuse of organ, Lamarck says that if you acquire a character, that character may get transferred to the next generation. That character may get transferred to your offsprings. So these acquired characters are then inherited to offsprings. Classical example, which actually it was given by not Darwin, actually given by Lamarck, is a example of blacksmith. As you can see here, a blacksmith is actually hammering and doing his regular work of hammering the iron and all. Blacksmith's muscles, built through years of work, were thought to be inherited to his son. What blacksmith does, actually, he is continuously doing physical exerting work. He's continuously doing a hammering movement, because of which his shoulders and his arms are becoming stronger and stronger over time. So this could be understood very easily, that if you go to the gym, if you are somebody is an ironsmith or blacksmith, and somebody is going to the gym and he is doing lots and lots of exercise, definitely that person is going to develop muscles. But the second part of this theory given by Lamarck, which is the inheritance of acquired character, that is very, very unlikely to happen actually. Simply, it's like the Lamarck is saying that a bodybuilder, a person who is building his body in the gym, will acquire the character to the next generation, and the baby which he is going to have will automatically be having muscles by itself without going to the gym. This becomes something unbelievable actually, and it needs the support of an evidence actually, indeed, which unfortunately is not with it. With this second part of this theory, the first part of this theory, use and disuse of organ, can be considered true, but the second part, due to lack of evidences, it cannot be considered as a fact. Then the second example which was given by Lamarck was the giraffe's neck. Giraffe's neck. Previously, long time ago, giraffe's neck was not quite that much long, as you can see here. So they had a shorter neck. They reached for higher leaves out of necessity, because the plants which were at their height were getting perished. They were getting eliminated from the environment. And they had a shorter neck, but due to their necessity to feed upon taller trees, they had to stretch their necks. They had to work on their necks. They had to impart pressure on their necks. And they had to extend their necks to a larger extent. It was a necessity because they had to feed. They had to feed from the taller plants. So their neck became taller, 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 and taller. Constant stretching. They constantly stretched their neck, because of which, if they were having a 1 foot neck, for example, at the end of their lives or at the time when they reproduced, their neck became 1.25 feet or 1.5 feet long. This is just an example. Repeated efforts during a lifetime slightly elongated their necks. This is an example of use of organ. They are using their neck, so their neck is getting stronger, and in this case they are stretching their neck, so their neck is getting elongated because of the stretching. Now they have acquired a character throughout their life. They stretched their neck and their neck became longer. This is their character now. This is the first part. Yes, it can be understood very well, but the second part of Lamarck's theory tells us that the extension of neck and the elongated neck will be transferred to the next generation as such. This is something which needs a huge pile of evidence in order to be proven, in order to be established as a fact. Lamarckism versus Darwinism. Darwinism, which is one of the most celebrated theory in biology and one of the most undisputedly accepted theory, Darwinism is there. So obviously Darwinism is becoming fact by time. So when we compare Darwinism to Lamarckism, there are few very basic differences between these two theories. Two competing visions of how evolution works. These are two totally different visions how evolution works, but both are trying to explain how evolution is occurring. Same destination, very different mechanisms they are telling. First, Lamarck, trait acquired during life through use, effort, or environment are passed to offspring. This is what Lamarck is saying. Individual drives change, then directed adaptation. Lifetime changes are heritable. Lamarck said that lifetime changes, the changes which are occurring in our body, they can be inherited to the next generation. On the other hand side, Darwin says pre-existing heritable variation confers survival advantage, leading to differential reproduction. What Darwin actually is trying to tell you, that already available variations which are there in their genes, in the genes of an organisms, if those changes are favorable according to the environment, that organism will survive. On the other hand side, if the changes are not suitable according to the environment, that organisms will perish. They get perished. They will be eliminated from the environment. Environment selects the change the change which is suitable to survive in that area, in that environment, in that place. Unidirected natural selection. Nature selects only the fittest one. Only genetic traits are heritable, he is saying. Darwinism, although at that point of time when Darwin explained the evolution's theory through natural selection, no genetics and no DNA and no genes were known to humans. But still, Darwin predicted it, Darwin said it, that only genetic traits are heritable in his words. Okay. Then the downfall of Lamarckism. Let's not say it a downfall actually. He just tried to give his theory, the nature he understood. He tried to explain the best he possible for him. The downfall of Lamarckism, how it actually happened. Weismann. Who is Weismann? Weismann was a scientist, you can say, was a scientist, and he explained how exactly the Lamarckism is actually not accurate. How he proved it? He proved it by an experiment. Which experiment? The experiment was related to a mice. He cut off the mice's tail. He cut off the mice's tail and let the mice reproduce. He done the same thing with the newborn mice. At the very same time when the mice was born, he cut off the tail of the newborn mice. The newborn mice, he developed, he achieved maturity, and he again, those mice again, they reproduced. And after reproduction, the offsprings which he got, those offsprings were again subjected to their tail being cut. And the same experiment was repeated on and on for several generations, up to 20, 21 something generations. This was actually happening. The Weismann was trying to understand Lamarckism. What Lamarck said? Lamarck said that acquired character will get transferred to the next generation. If we cut the mice tail, a mouse's tail, what will happen? It is an acquired character now. Will this character be transferred to the next generation? Will the baby mice which is getting born, will the baby mice will have a full grown tail, or it will not have any tail because their parents are not having any tail because Weismann have cut it. This same experiment of cutting the mice's tail was repeated for 20 to 21 generation, and still in the 20th or 22nd generation, the tail of the mice was intact. There was no change, not even a slightest of a change in the length of a mice, length of that tail of a mice. So this experiment proves what? That inherited characters cannot, the acquired characters cannot get inherited as such. They needs to be that needs to be inculcated. They needs to be changed into the mechanism of DNA. Then the second thing which proves the Lamarckism is not correct or accurate up to a certain extent, it is Mendelian genetics. Mendelian genetics. Mendelian genetics is a huge topic to talk about. Mendelian genetics. And the third one, modern consensus. Modern experimentations, modern consensus is again something which we can rely upon, which tells us that Lamarckism is not completely accurate. Then acquired traits versus natural selection. Again, the same thing, nearly the same thing which we had earlier discussed while considering the difference between Darwinism and Lamarckism. Lamarck's view: traits shaped by efforts and environment during life, passed on to offsprings. This is possible that traits may get shaped. New characters may arise in organisms according to environment. This is sometimes possible, yes. But those characters cannot get transferred into the next generation as such. This is a fact. What Darwin says, traits shaped by random variations, survivors reproduce, population shifts. In simple words, Darwin says, if a change is occurring in an organism and that change is favorable for him or her or for that organism in that environment, that organisms will keep on surviving. and only the organisms which are surviving will be reproducing, and those traits will be get transferred to the next generation with slight change possibly, and survivors will reproduce and populations will shift, and only the populations which are having favorable characters will survive in the environment, and the organisms which are not having favorable characters to live in that specific area, to live in that specific environment, they will get eliminated by the nature. Then modern consciences, we had already discussed. Lamarck is largely discredited, yet science has found a nuanced parallel. Heritable changes in gene expression without DNA sequence alteration, etc. Then environment factors can trigger epigenetic changes. That is also correct. Environmental factors, environmental pollutants sometimes may trigger some genetic changes in DNA. Some changes may be passed to offsprings up to a very smaller extent, although, but yes, it is possible. The studies are undergoing right now. Studies are undergoing from a lot of time right now, that some changes may pass on to offsprings which we acquire in our lifetime. So it is still under consideration, but it is discredited because of its inheritance of acquired characters, because the characters you acquire in your lifetime cannot get transmitted to the next generation as such. Remember the example of ironsmith. The ironsmith is actually performing the hammering work, performing the hammering movement continuously, due to which his arm are getting stronger and stronger by time. But it cannot be said that the ironsmith's son will be having stronger arms by birth. Then a legacy of Lamarck. Let's talk about the legacy of Lamarck, what he had given to the science. Species change over time. First, to systematically argue that life evolves through natural processes. He was the first person. We had earlier discussed it in the first slide, that Lamarck was among the first scientists to argue that living organisms can change over time through natural processes. Although he was not correct at few points, but still he argued that natural laws may lead to certain characteristic changes in organisms. Sparked scientific debate. This is one of the most crucial part here. His idea provoked critical thinking that shaped later evolutionary biology. He ignited the thoughts. He ignited the thoughts. He inspired Darwin, who is considered to be very correct at this point of time on Earth among the scientific community. The Darwinism, or the Darwinian thinking way of thinking, the theory of evolution by natural selection. That person was inspired by Lamarck. Darwin was inspired by Lamarck. Darwin studied Lamarck very well. So the Lamarck, actually he was disproved at certain points, but still he sparked the debate. He sparked the idea of naturally occurring changes in environment, naturally occurring changes in living organisms. He sparked the idea. He ignited the fire of thoughts. Coin biology pioneered invertebrate classification. He pioneered invertebrate classification and gave science a foundational term of biology. Stepping stone in evolutionary thoughts, Lamarckism, species change over time. The core idea was something very strong, which Lamarck had, that species changes over time, and that is the basic fundamental idea which we still believe in, that species will change over time. Species will change over time due to many reasons, due to this and this and this reasons. There are many reasons, but the basic and core idea of this is that species will change over time, and this was ignited, this was actually preached by Lamarck. He was amongst the few first persons. Then, and up until now, genetics and Darwinism, correct mechanism identified later on through natural selection and heritable genes, etc., etc. Then comes the modern biology, which preaches the epigenetics nuance. Evolution is richer than any single theory, and we cannot predict evolution in very reliable way. Scientific understanding is never final. Yes, that is, it's a process. Science is a process. Scientific understanding never ends. Somebody is having one theory, another person is having a totally different theory. One person's theory may be lacking some points, another person's theory may add those points to that theory. So it's a process. Science is a process. Scientific understanding is never final. It builds, refines, and evolves just like life itself. If you like the presentation, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel for more these biology videos and biology explanations, which we usually upload on our YouTube channel. Thank you.